The following program is intended for mature audiences.
Rudy's Revelation.
This is a conspiracy.
Google me, bitch! Google me!
Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode. It is November 29th. Welcome to this special report. It's going to be brief. It is still sort of a holiday. I guess it's Black Friday today. But thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, give me a thumbs up. Let's get into the news today. It's going to be full of Brit news because they're not having a holiday today. Thanksgiving is a uniquely American holiday. So let's get into the news. These headlines for today, Friday, happy Friday, November 29th. All right, we're going to start with the New York Times. Now, this is very unique. You need to check this out. The U.S. is building an early warning system to detect geoengineering, of all things. The story goes on to say they're building a global alarm system, one that can detect if another country or maybe just an adventurous billionaire tries to dim the sun. Well, what do you think is wrong with this friggin' picture? Now, it doesn't say whether or not the United States is conducting weather modification, or if they like to say or use the term geoengineering. See, geoengineering is a broad term of how scientists use different methods to change what's going on with the planet naturally. So change the weather or to change things on the planet. There are a lot of different, using Agent Orange in Vietnam, which was a defoliant, was geoengineering. So geoengineering has a wide swath of meaning. The article goes on to say, every few weeks, researchers in Boulder, Colorado release a balloon that rises 17 miles into the sky. Similar balloons are launched with less frequency in sites in Alaska, Hawaii, and New Zealand. Reunion Island, near the coast of Africa, and even Antarctica, they make up building blocks of a system that would alert American scientists to geoengineering. As the planet continues to heat up, the article goes on to say, the idea of intentionally trying to block solar radiation, sometimes called solar radiation modification, solar engineering, or climate intervention, could be a problem. Of course, it had many worry that solar engineering could have unintended consequences, shattering regional weather patterns and damaging everything from agriculture to local economies. And the first steps could even be done quietly by rogue actor or another nation operating without any regulations or controls. And that's exactly what's happening right now. The American government has been conducting geoengineering experiments since the early 70s, and even way earlier than that as far as weather modification is concerned. So this is the problem. If you didn't know, sometimes I've reported on this, is that one of the reasons we're having issues with the climate is because one of the many people here might have heard of HAARP, and that is a weather modification experiment where they send up beams into the atmosphere to try to regulate the weather patterns, and so forth and so on. So also an early experiment, they were shooting powerful plasma beams into the jet stream to try to get it, try to be able to modify the weather. Well, what they did is they burned a hole in the ozone. So really, then they started in the late 70s to come up with this narrative about the humans destroying the ozone when it was actually their mad scientist experiments. So the United States has been conducting weather modification for some time. This is geoengineering. The reason that there are global treaties against weather modification is specifically, if you're adherents to that, where the United States has signed on to treaties, but they haven't adhered to them, is because if you change the weather where you are, it's going to change the weather somewhere else. And that's why they didn't want to allow nations to modify the weather, because it's going to cause issues for other places on the globe. And that's exactly what's happening. So if you try to make it rain in the desert, you might cause a drought somewhere else. The fact is that the New York Times is reporting on this in such a science fiction-esque way is the problem entirely. It's like looking past what is actually going on to try to create a narrative about something that isn't really going on. Now, widely in the news lately, there have been reports of places like Abu Dhabi and the United Arab Emirates making it rain in the desert. So they do that, but it's going to have effects somewhere else in the globe. But what they don't report in the mainstream media is what many people in the United States see all the time, is chemtrails. Now, how come you don't see these? There are planes flying in other places in the globe. How come you don't see these trails that, if you know anything about condensation trails or contrails, that's when the air is heats up because of jet exhaust, and it causes a plume. But when that air cools back down, the plume goes away. Chemtrails, on the other hand, is when they mix particulate in jet fuel and other chemicals in jet fuel, and it causes a lasting plume. This plume is then followed by clouds and then presumably rain, if it works. This is weather modification. This isn't, are they spraying chemicals on people? Maybe in some instances, but the likelihood of that is slim. The real thing about chemtrails is it's weather modification. So they're doing it illegally, and as we find out in this article, is that they don't know what the unintended consequences are. Moving on to other headlines here. For today, Friday, Tesla owners turn on Musk. I'm embarrassed about driving this car around. This is from The Guardian. The electric car brand was once a liberal favorite, but the CEO's embrace of Trump has led to an angry backlash. I thought of this recently. We were driving somewhere yesterday for Thanksgiving. I saw a Tesla, and I'm thinking to myself, man, if these people are liberals, they must be mad and having to drive around in this car that they invested in and now is a symbol of Elon Musk, who has supported Trump and is now a favorite or darling of the right. Other headlines from Reuters: after Australia legislated teen social media ban, it has to figure out how to enforce it. Elon Musk wrote, seems like a backdoor way to control access to the internet by all Australians. So if you don't know anything about laws, this is the thing about law, is it might seemingly be touted as helping the populace for X, Y, or Z. But when you outlaw something and they can track who is disobeying the law, then they have leverage. The government has leverage against you. This is what they did with outlawing recreational drugs like cocaine and marijuana that was smoked mostly by the poor, blacks and Hispanics in the South and Southwest, was a way to marginalize those groups and keep them under the thumb of the government, because they're openly breaking laws. And so they could just send the cops in whenever, and they know that people are smoking marijuana, and arrest them. It's the same thing with this, is you can control people that violate, and you know the teens are going to violate the law, and at an early age, they're going to be compromised. Daily Mail reports the Rust Belt city where children keep vanishing and there's no one to look for them. At least 43 kids have gone missing from East Cleveland this past decade. If you don't know the Cleveland story about the guy that abducted women, he had 4 women kept captive in his home. This shit happens all the time. And the reason is there is a market for it. There's a market. And it even says in the story, it even says this in the story, to introduce kids into sex trafficking or kidnap kids for sex. The Telegraph also reports here the plan to set U.S. Special Forces on Mexican drug cartels and why experts say it won't work. It will work. The fact is that they have to interdict what gangs are doing on both sides of the border. Donald Trump has pledged to confront gangs head on, but they are so well armed they could prove a match for anything. People should look into it. They are heavily armed, but this is what the military should be used for, particularly on Mexican soil. If the Mexicans don't do it, certainly the Americans can. BBC is reporting MPs back proposal to legalize assisted dying. If you didn't know, this was happening at great length. To 30,000 so far in Canada have been euthanized by the state. MPs have backed proposals to legalize assisted dying in England and Wales in his historic vote, which paves the way for a change in the law. Under draft legislation being considered by Parliament, terminally ill adults expected to die within 6 months could seek help to end their own life. It won't stop there. And if you know in other places, this isn't, people just get depressed and they can apply to the government to end their life. The Telegraph reports a 22-year-old woman who was on the brink of being euthanized and changed her mind. Dutch psychiatric patient Romy's last-minute change of heart teaches us a vital lesson regarding the UK's proposed assisted dying bill. Indeed. The problem is that people without their complete mental faculties, if they don't really know what they're thinking or considering, and obviously if you're considering about killing yourself, you're mentally incapacitated. People of their right mind don't choose to end their life. If there's a lot of suffering they're enduring, a decision like this can be made over months or even years. And should be taken that long to make sure. But as the Canada law has, you fill out an application and the government can approve you in a month. The Los Angeles Times is reporting a member of the prominent Rothschild family found dead after Laurel Canyon house fire. And the article goes on to say a man found dead in his home, badly damaged by fire Wednesday afternoon, was a member of the prominent Rothschild banking family. Who knows what went on here? Usually fires are set to hide evidence of a murder. So we don't know anything really else, except if you didn't know about the Rothschild family, a sprawling, and they say Jewish, they're, as Perry would call them, pseudo-Jews. They're not practicing Jews, but they are of Jewish lineage. The family originated from Frankfurt, Germany, long dominated European banking, with its English and French branches playing major roles in finance and politics. Most notably during the 18th and 19th century. At one point, the Rothschilds were widely considered to have amassed the largest private fortune on earth, and probably still do. But the way people record income now, things can be hidden. Telegraph reports, watch distraught liberals hold group scream on beach following Trump victory. Dozens of people gathered near Milwaukee, Wisconsin to scream at the shore of Lake Michigan. If you didn't see this, more libtards doing stupid things. You don't have anything to do with your time than to express frustration over a political outcome. And most of these people a decade ago weren't politically involved anyway. But they got involved with OFA. OFA knew how to leverage your compassion into being a political activist. And so they said, if you have a heart and you care about people, you don't want Donald Trump because he's going to hurt everybody. And then it talks about the left-wing voters screamed at Lake Michigan. Who cares? The Telegraph also reports how Rachel Maddow is dragging MSNBC down With the rise once more of Donald Trump, the news anchor and broadcaster are being overshadowed by alternative media figures. Yes. Rachel Maddow always sucked. The thing is that she leaned into the camera and into people's bleeding hearts, and people thought that she was a spokesman for the bleeding heart liberal. When she was just a quick-witted propagandist, weaving a narrative of, racists on the right, that sort of thing. Authoritarian racists on the right, the new rise of Hitler, fascism, or whatever. The people on MSNBC propagated this narrative, which was false, and most people are learning it's false. If you haven't heard, MSNBC lost about half their viewers after election. My brother isn't even watching MSNBC. So Morning Joe and Rachel Maddow and Joy Reid are going to be looking for a job pretty soon, because whoever buys the network spinoff is probably going to rebrand it, particularly in this time of Trump. And it's not just Trump, it's global political populism. Is the left has largely abandoned the working class and the concerns of working people for the concerns and narratives of the elite. The Daily Mail is reporting mysterious lights over Capitol sparks fears of UFOs in Washington, D.C. It's not that. If they are UFOs, and this is what people say all the time, is that at heightened risk of nuclear conflict, all of a sudden people start seeing UFOs over bases and things like that. More than likely, there's sophisticated surveillance, drones. So that's really it's not that I don't believe in UFOs, but I think it's unlikely that there are other explanations. I know people are in love with UFOs and the thought of aliens and stuff, but go ahead, look into space. What do you see in infinite space? Nothing. A void. No life, for the most part. So in infinite space, maybe somewhere does life, advanced life exist? Well, maybe it is infinite space, but there's been no real proof. So, little lights in the sky, that doesn't mean anything. The Post-Millennial is reporting, this is that same story as where liberals let out primal scream, release our pain and frustration. These people are ridiculous. The Federalist is reporting conservatives fear Arizona House Committee shakeup could stymie election integrity bills. This is true. And the list of House committees published last week by the Speaker-elect Steve Montenegro revealed that the Municipal Oversight and Elections Committee is no more. They got rid of it. So this is the problem here. They wedged those responsibilities into another committee on military affairs and federalism issues. Arizona, particularly Arizona, with a slew of other states, really needs to have their election integrity scrutinized, because like California, if you take 3 weeks after the vote, there's a problem. Why are you taking 3 weeks to count votes? Because they keep and their own admittance, they keep wanting to administer more ballots. Oh, these people, they need to vote. These people, their vote should be counted. Meanwhile, nobody even considers the fact that those ballots aren't legitimate. The real reason Kamala Harris lost, we're going to get to that in just a second. Well, one of the reasons, National Review says that trust the science, DEI is dangerous. This is one of the reasons, even though they tried not to campaign on woke, that the specter of DEI and wokeness was all around Kamala Harris, and particularly Tim Walz as well. It oozed out of their pores, even though they didn't mention it. So the National Review goes on to say about the DEI-themed training programs and so forth and so on. But what it says is that a new study confirms that DEI programs foster racial and group animosity, not tolerance. It does just the opposite. And this is what I said all along. When you keep bringing up race, it makes people racist. People don't like the idea of a colorblind society, but that's what it should be, because you talk about race and subconsciously it's going to sit there like a specter, waiting until a race issue comes up, and then you're going to refer to that animosity that was created by talking about race in such a way. Because a lot of times talking about differences between people makes people feel uncomfortable. As many people have said, and I'll say, is the best thing to do is find out what you have in common. That breeds tolerance. Because then you're like, oh, that guy's like me, but he's not like me in this way. Fox News is reporting Fetterman berates Democrats for freaking out over Trump victory. Just grab a grip. He still doesn't have his verbiage completely correct, but that's good enough. Grab a grip. If you freak out on anything, you lose a kind of relevance. Of course he does. So he was asked by a reporter, realized that this is how Fetterman says this is how election goes. At least for the next 2 years, we're going to have the opportunity to write the narrative and drive that narrative. His advice was to be patient and avoid over-the-top resistance. I'm just saying, Fetterman went on to say, buckle up and pack a lunch because it's going to be 4 years of this. And if you have a choice to freak out, on the hour, then that's your right. But I will not. He says, I'm not that dude. I'm not that Democrat. I'm going to pick my fights. And then he adds a word of advice. If you're going to freak out on everything, you lose any kind of relevance. The Guardian also had this story, The Great Abandonment, what happens to the natural world when people disappear across the globe. Vast swaths of land are being left to be reclaimed by nature. To see what could be coming, look to Bulgaria. The reality of this story is it's another one of these, the world without people stories, that look how great nature is when people aren't involved. Well, people are involved. People are part of nature if they choose to take that path, which is the path I suggest people to take. But the problem is the lefties who used to be tree huggers and whatnot, those people are turning to the right now because what leftists who are involved in nature forget is that there's something called natural law. And how can you defy natural law in your own life, in your own health, and the way you conduct yourself, and then you retreat to it when you're talking about nature? You are part of nature, and so you should adhere to things like natural law to perpetuate nature in the way it's been designed, period. All right. Associated Press are in to begin enriching uranium with thousands of advanced centrifuges. Excuse me. U.S. watchdog reports. I reported this day before yesterday as well. This is the result of Biden's foreign policy, Blinken's foreign policy, was to take a lighter hand with certain adversaries, knowing that when you give them back money and then you allow them to their own devices, what are they going to do? They're going to try to build nuclear weapons, and they're going to launch terrorist or attacks through proxy. Newsweek is reporting Russia and China staged nuclear bomber exercise in the Sea of Japan. So Russia and China was conducting nuclear war drills, as was the United States and Finland was simulating a nuclear bombing run with conventional bombers, though, over Finland. Also, if you haven't heard, Bolsonaro is making a comeback bid in Brazil and betting on Trump's help. So this is the rise of populism worldwide. And what was a blow to Lula da Silva, who was the communist president there who cheated Bolsonaro out of the second term, along with the Supreme Court, it has been found that the Supreme Court of Brazil rolled back their anti-corruption probes as part of a multinational corruption probe in South America, rolled those things back. And one of the targets of the anti-corruption probe was, in fact, Lula da Silva, who was arrested for corruption and removed from office. So now Bolsonaro is trying to make a comeback, and this latest news of the rolling back of the anti-corruption thing, because Bolsonaro was big on anti-corruption, and he forwarded many bills and many programs like the one that they rolled back. And he's going to try to undo this supposed charges of a coup attempt It wasn't a coup. He was like Donald Trump did the same thing. It was like, hey, I got cheated out of a second term. People need to look at this. That's not a coup. A coup is actually the cheat that disallows Bolsonaro in this case and Trump in 2020 the right, a democratic right to return. Daily Mail, did I cover this story? I did. Yeah, here's the text from that story. Just some numbers from that Rust Belt children disappearances. 24 girls and 19 boys over the last decade, ranging from the ages of 9 to 17. There's obviously a predator there, or predators, Redfields that are collecting young people for sale, for sex, or they're kept for themselves, but there's more money in child sex trafficking than there is. There's no money if you decide to kidnap a child and use it for sex yourself. All of these, which are heinous and illegal. But the feds, if Trump takes office, I would suggest he puts a federal task force together to investigate this. Is that it? I think that's it for today. Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe. It's kind of a quick episode. Sorry it was late today. It was 11 o'clock, but it is sort of a holiday. I mean, the Friday after Thanksgiving is a holiday. To recover, watch football, although I don't watch football, not anymore. Go shopping or do whatever. So thanks for joining me today. I may have a special report over the weekend with Perry. We'll see. If not, I'll see you Monday. Stay hip to the trick. And don't forget, you're under attack. Psychologically, biologically. Check me out on social media. X, Facebook, Getter Minds, Truth Social. Check out my Substack. And join me here on Rumble every day, Monday through Friday, live at, usually at 10 a.m. It was a little late today, God forgive me. All right, see you Monday.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.